Not too long ago, I found myself at a relative's wedding. As usual, I was bored to tears. I was just hanging out when I spied this really fantastic-looking woman. She was mid to late 20s, around 5'8", and of a slender, athletic build. She had long, sandy blonde hair that was mid-back length. This girl was quite attractive, and one of the few wearing incredibly tight designer jeans and a nice form-fitting white top. When I saw her, I was at the reception, and many people were there in all levels of dress, from street clothes to tuxedos. This particular girl was mesmerizing. She was wearing a pair of tan spike heel boots, and watching those heels punishing the lawn was a sight to behold. I was sort of following her around with my eyes pretty much glued to her feet. I watched as her heels sank effortlessly into the lawn. Then I marveled at the clicking sound they produced as she walked across the front porch and its wooden floor. Her heels left tiny dents on the floor with every step. I watched as she stood by the door, twisting and turning and rocking on her heels, while digging a nice little pair of deep dents into the wood floor. I was really getting turned on by this. I had to have her step on my fingers, or at least my toes. I noticed that they had a couple of throw rugs in the hall by the stairs. I thought to myself, if only she would go by the stairs. I could sit there and position my hand under the rug in a place where she would step on it. I sat down there and waited. A few minutes later, another rather nice-looking woman of around 40 stood next to me. I was somewhat annoyed until I noticed that although she was older, she was rather attractive and had very nice-looking feet. She was wearing a nice lace-type dress and sandals with heels of about 4. She was around 5'4" and 140 lbs. Although the blonde was much younger and more attractive, this woman was quite nice to look at as well, and those sandals and her feet were very sexy indeed. I decided to see if I might be able to get my fingers trampled by her. Her feet were very animated, constantly moving and prancing about. I slid my hand under the carpet and was quickly treated to a nice trampling. Initially, her heel grazed one finger, then she stepped to the side, then repositioned herself and stepped squarely on my hand with her entire foot. She then stepped off and stood in the same place for a while. I repositioned my hand behind her heel, and within half a minute or so, she stepped back and sunk her heel into the top of my hand. She stood there with her weight mostly on her other foot. Then I saw her hips shift and felt the excruciating pain as her weight shifted back onto the foot that was on my hand. Her heel ground into the top of my hand as she stood there. I marveled at the sight of her heel compressing against the top of her shoe, looked down at the tiny tip of her high-heeled sandal where it stood proudly atop the rug and my hand underneath it, and watched as it sank unmercifully into both. After several minutes of this, she finally walked away. I was just about to remove my hand to assess the damage when another young girl of about 12 stepped squarely on my hand. She was around 5 and probably weighed just under 100 lbs. But she was wearing a pair of white pumps with a 3-spike heel. She stood on my hand for a moment, then stepped off. She was about 6 from my hand at this point, so I didn't move. Then all of a sudden someone bumped into her, and she stumbled back and stomped hard on my hand with her heel as she regained her balance. My God, the pain was unbelievable. I could not believe this small young girl could have exerted such force on my hand. My hand now hurt like hell. Finally, she stepped off my hand, and I found my chance to remove it and assess the damage. As I was looking at the bruises and cuts, the girl in the jeans that I was so interested in at first appeared out of nowhere and was standing right next to me. I had to get her to step on me. I slid my hand under the rug again and jockeyed for a good position. I waited, and I got more and more frustrated as she just stood there but never raised a heel or offered any opportunity for me to get my fingers under her foot. Finally, someone she knew walked up and they hugged. At this moment, she raised her heels off the floor. I didn't hesitate for even a second. I slid my fingers under her heels, which were about 4 apart. About 10 seconds later, she came down on my hand with both heels and stood there. I was so turned on and in so much pain that I liked to die. My eyes were scanning from the tips of her little heels to her lovely ass and back down again. The feeling of those heels on my hand was both amazing and incredibly painful. She stood like that for what seemed like an hour, but for what was probably no more than a couple of minutes. She would slightly shift her weight from one foot to the other, but she kept her weight on my hand at all times. I was beginning to lose feeling in my fingers and was getting worried. Finally, she stepped off my hand, and at that time I decided to call it a day.